It was supposed to be a short road trip, just a weekend getaway to a quiet cabin in the mountains. For the Johnsons, a family of 4, this was supposed to be a time of relaxation, a break from their busy lives. But as the night grew darker and the rain began to pour in torrents, it felt as though the storm itself was conspiring against them. Dan, the father, gripped the steering wheel tightly as he navigated the slick, winding road. The headlights cut through the thick mist and heavy rain, but they barely illuminated the path ahead. His wife, Emily, sat beside him, silently watching the road as if willing them to reach their destination faster. In the back seat, their 2 children, 10-year-old Sarah and 12-year-old Liam, were quiet, their faces illuminated by the dim glow of their smartphones. "Dan, we're almost there," Dan muttered, trying to reassure them all, though he wasn't entirely sure. The weather had worsened since they left and the road had become treacherous. He glanced at the rearview mirror, noticing that Liam was leaning forward, his gaze fixed on something outside. "Liam, Dad, look! There's someone out there!" Dan slowed the car, peering through the windshield, but the heavy downpour made it impossible to see clearly. He strained his eyes, squinting through the glass, and then he saw it. A figure standing at the side of the road, drenched and motionless. The person was dressed in dark, ragged clothing, their face hidden beneath a soaked hood. "Emily, should we stop? Dan, it's dangerous out there. We can't just leave someone stranded." He pulled over to the side of the road, and the figure approached the car, moving slowly, almost eerily, as if the storm didn't affect them at all. The figure reached the passenger side, and Dan rolled down the window just enough to hear, "Stranger, thank you for stopping. I'm just trying to get to the next town. Please, it's cold out here. Could you help me?" Dan exchanged a glance with Emily. She nodded slightly, and with a sigh, he unlocked the door. The stranger slid into the car without another word, their damp clothes leaving a chilling dampness in the air. They smelled of wet earth and something else, something faintly metallic, like old rust. "Dan, where are you headed, stranger?" "Anywhere. I'm just looking for a place to be." The air inside the car grew heavy, and an uncomfortable tension filled the space. Emily tried to shake off the uneasy feeling creeping up her spine. She smiled at the children, trying to reassure them, but the atmosphere had changed. The storm outside intensified, as though the world itself was closing in on them. It wasn't long before they reached a fork in the road, an old forgotten path they hadn't seen before. The stranger's voice cut through the air like a knife. "Stranger, take the left. It's faster." Dan was about to protest, but something about the stranger's command felt urgent, almost hypnotic. He glanced at Emily, but she said nothing, her face pale. "Dan, all right." He steered the car left down the narrow, crumbling road. The trees seemed to close in on them, the branches reaching like gnarled fingers clawing at the car. The rain fell in torrents, making it almost impossible to see, but the stranger just stared straight ahead, unblinking. "Stranger, you shouldn't have stopped for me." "Dan, what do you mean?" The stranger's face slowly turned, their eyes glowing faintly in the dark, as if there was something not entirely human about them. "Stranger, I wasn't stranded. I've been waiting for you. Liam, Dad, who is this person?" But before Dan could answer, the stranger turned to face him fully, and in that moment the car's headlights flashed across their face, revealing something horrifying, an empty, gaping mouth where a face should have been. The eyes were dark pits, and the air around them seemed to grow colder with every breath. "Stranger, don't listen to them. They will all die, one by one." The car swerved violently as Dan tried to regain control, but it was too late. The road ahead split into two, and the rain seemed to turn to something far worse. The strange passenger's voice echoed in the car, now twisted and harsh, as though hundreds of voices were speaking in unison. "Stranger, you all stopped, and now you'll never leave." As the family screamed, the car was suddenly jerked forward, its wheels skidding across the wet road. The darkness around them closed in, and the world seemed to distort. The trees bled into shadows, and the storm outside turned into a violent, suffocating darkness that pressed against the windows. The strange passenger's form began to shift, becoming an amorphous, nightmarish figure that loomed over them. Then the rain stopped. For a moment, everything was silent. "Emily, Dan, look!" But when she turned, the stranger was no longer there. In their place was a mass of twisted, writhing shadows coalescing into shapes of people, faces, memories of those who had disappeared over the years. The storm had stopped, but they were not alone anymore. Each of them, Dan, Emily, Liam and Sarah, felt the icy grip of something long dead and long forgotten, something that had been waiting for their stop, waiting for them to take in the passenger who had no intention of leaving. And just before the world swallowed them whole, the last thing they heard was the echo of the stranger's voice, low and cruel. "Stranger, you should have kept driving." The next morning, the road was clear, the storm gone, and there was no sign of the Johnsons. The car, abandoned and empty, sat on the side of the road. No tracks, no blood. Just the lingering sense that someone had taken them and the world had moved on. Subscribe to Terror Tales, like and share our channel. Hit the bell for more horror stories. Thank you for watching.